We're live.
Good morning, everybody. I am welcome to the Sea Pines Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors meeting of Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. We met an executive session earlier this morning, so I'm calling the meeting back to order out of executive session. Mr. Corbett, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. I'd like to call the Sea Pines CSA Board of Directors meeting minutes of February 8th, 2022. You all have had a chance to review those. Are there any additional changes or questions? Seeing none, I'll move for approval. Do we have a second? Mr. Caskey seconded. Is there any, all in favor of approving those minutes of February 8th? Raise your hand. Any objection? Seeing none, they are approved. We had a discussion during executive session of a desire to use electronic methods for our annual meeting notice and proxy. And so I'm going to move the following resolution for adoption by the board. Resolved, Sea Pines Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors approved per CSA bylaws, Article 4, Section 4B, notice of annual meetings of the membership to be sent by electronic methods. Further, the Board of Directors approves electronic proxy administration of such meetings. Is there any questions about this? We'd like to, again, continue to update our ability to deal with our members for the annual meeting. And we would send out our proxies, notice of meeting and proxies by email, in addition to those that we don't have emails for, we'll handle otherwise. Any questions? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a second. Mr. Thompson, seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you all. I think that's a great improvement and a continued. I know the public will be happy to get less mail and more email and get it done that way. And I urge those who are watching this meeting, when you do get your emails, please send your proxies back. The only way we can have a meeting that works is to have a quorum. And I'd like to have a quorum on the first call rather than the second or third call. The annual meeting, by the way, is scheduled for May 4th at 10 a.m. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. Next is my chair remarks. I'm going to keep it brief because I do expect to talk a little bit more when we get to the Revenue Task Force. I want to note for those who are using their properties in residence now, you will find, as I'm sure we all do, that as anticipated, Sea Pines continues to be at or near capacity for almost every day. Traffic shows that. The number of people walking around our various commercial areas, it shows that. The beach shows that. I think that's a great tribute to how popular Sea Pines has become, but it just continues to emphasize the need to recognize that Sea Pines at full occupancy is a different lifestyle and has different needs than Sea Pines in 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about during the Revenue Task Force. With that, I'll turn it over to Sam for the President's remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine will be very brief as well. We have lots to discuss under the director's reports. And I'd just like to thank the CSA employees for all their hard work over the last couple of months. The community looks fantabulous, and the North Sea Pines Drive project is finally coming to fruition. There is a lot going on and will be a lot going on over the next couple of months as we move into the summer season, and the employees are the ones that make it happen for us. So I just want to thank them, and I'll have more to say during the director's reports.
Okay, well, with that, I guess we will move to the director's reports. First up is capital projects and community development. Russell, before I turn the mic over to you, on behalf of the community, I want to thank you and your team for the work that was done on the North Sea Pines project. For those who have been in Sea Pines at all during this work and have had to endure some of the traffic issues, but have had the opportunity to ride along North Sea Pines Drive during this construction project, you can appreciate just how significant a project it turned out to be. What we're finding is that based on the pictures I've seen and the one or two times I've ridden it, what we're finding is that a 60-year-old road has surprises underneath that no one could have possibly anticipated. People were running cables and wires underneath the road in a way that we couldn't have expected when we opened it up. And the pipes that we were built 60 years ago clearly were no longer working. But having, for a couple of my friends who've actually ridden on North Sea Pines, I haven't had a chance to, are quite pleased with the quality of the road, the quality of the trail, leisure trails, the expansion of the leisure trails. And so for those who voted for the money to do these projects, I think you're going to find that your votes have been well rewarded. And this is just the first step in the critical infrastructure improvements that we're going to undertake. So Russell, thank you again to you and your staff. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay this morning?
We can.
Thank you. Appreciate your kind remarks and certainly appreciate the cooperation, understanding, and patience of the property owners along Sea Pines Drive. It's been tremendous to work with a lot of them during the construction. As mentioned, the project is coming to a close here. We're in our final stages, going through our punch list items now, working on project restoration and cleanup of the 1.5 miles of roadway and leisure trail that was under construction. We have work currently going on, the last portion of drainage work in Beach Walk 45 that ties in those T streets back to North Sea Pines Drive and across to the lagoon outfalls as part of the master stormwater work that we did do out there. Just a couple notes. Approximately 4,700 tons of asphalt was brought in for both roadway and leisure trail work, which equates to about 230 truckloads. All this asphalt comes from a great distance away, as we may imagine. So each truck travels over an hour to Sea Pines. So the feat of getting all these trucks in and out of the community, again, appreciate everyone's cooperation and the road closures and the detours that we had to put in place to bring this equipment and all this asphalt and materials into the community. The roadway and leisure trail, as Larry has mentioned, the leisure trail is much improved. Many of those areas that were reconstructed were only 5 or 6 feet wide, and now are 8 or 10 feet wide. In total, we installed about approximately 3/4 mile of new drainage pipe along the roadway. Permanent line striping and roadway reflectors are going to be scheduled here in the upcoming weeks. That will be the last portion of that work. We do have the temporary line striping in place. The resurfacing of Sand Hill Crane and there's stormwater drainage and resurfacing of Red Cardinal Road is going to be scheduled for a future point this season. The good news is for the immediate term, we're going to be taking a bit of a break from construction. That includes me as well. So I think it'll be a welcome respite for the community, as again, a lot of this roadway traffic detours were quite lengthy, backing up that traffic over the last weeks and months. So again, appreciate the understanding and cooperation to make this project happen. Without the owners, this would simply not have been possible. A few other notes on roadway construction. Some of the other projects that are in the queue in upcoming months ahead and years. Sea Pines Drive from Lighthouse to Audubon Road and then on to South Beach. Snowy Egret Road and Wagon Road are 2 areas that we've performed a lot of survey work in. So we have a lot of that data. We'll be working hand in hand with our MEMP task force, our infrastructure task force, in the coming weeks and months ahead to formulate a plan and a schedule for these projects. As the chairman mentioned, the community voted for the referendum and the funding for this future work. Again, this is a massive undertaking to get all this scheduled in the upcoming months and years ahead. So those roadways are obviously important to those homeowners in those areas of the community, and we'll be working to enhance those and rebuild those roads in the future. Beach boardwalks. We started construction earlier this season on Beach Boardwalk 15. That was completed. We're now working on Boardwalk 17, and then on currently about to start Boardwalk 41. and then scheduling the reconstruction repair of 41A and 44. As many of the owners know, especially that live along the ocean side of the community, these boardwalks are important to provide that egress down to the beach and back. So many of these boardwalks are now higher than they were in the past. As noted, they were washed out during Hurricane Matthew and then subsequently Irma. But the dune accretion or the sand accretion along the beach is significant over the last months since the beach renourishment was done by the town. So thus, some of these boardwalks are now higher than they were in the past. But our contractors out there are doing a great job, and we're looking forward to completing this work this spring. Our next flower change out executed by our landscape contractor is scheduled for next week. That's a partial flower change out. The spent flowers will be made available in lot 1 for anyone that's interested in picking those up. And also our pine straw applications are in progress in certain locations around the community. To conclude my remarks this morning, before taking a few questions, our land use management committee has been extremely busy, but I just want to acknowledge at this time, it's Dana Guazzo was so instrumental in bringing the community together and this group together some time back. We have received that information the other day that Dana will be stepping down from the land use management committee to put some focus to some things that she has in front of her. But I just publicly wanted to thank Dana, and I wouldn't be providing this report this morning if it was not for her. So Dana, we wish you all the best in the weeks and months ahead for you, and certainly we're here to carry on Dana's good work that she started so long ago. So again, thank you to her. A couple of remarks on the land use committee. Our committee has been busy looking at roadside barriers and markers along the road right away in Sea Pines. In many areas, you'll see these reflectors, posts, boulders, all sorts of makes and models that have been installed in the CSA road right away. We do want to work in the upcoming weeks and months ahead and years ahead to rectify some of these issues around the community and find a method that's acceptable where certain property owners want to denote their property from the roadway. So this task force will continue to work on those items in the months ahead this season. And quickly to wrap on land use management, we have issued 58 violations since the end of January to today. Most of those regarding landscaping, towels on railings, things of that nature, then lighting issues, lighting at night. So we do ask you be conscientious if you are turning on lights or spotlights and you're pointing them at your neighbor's house. Just some, those are some of the things that we've been noticing around the community. The lighting being one of them has been on the uptick. So those conclude my remarks this morning, Mr. Chairman. Glad to take any questions before we move on. So thank you.
Thank you, Russell. I want to add on behalf of the board, our thanks to Dana Guazzo. She was highly instrumental in creating the committee. While I served as chairman of the co-chair of the committee, she was an active participant in developing the protocols for notifying folks who had covenant violations and following through on some of the more egregious problems. And I know she was extremely active in helping the committee develop the land use management rules that we are living with today, including the enforcement mechanisms. And I don't think there's anyone in the community who's more passionate about land use management regulations than Dana. And so we thank her for her service, or now over 3 years of service. And I know the committee will miss her. Are there any other questions for Russell on either capital projects or land use management? Mr. Caskey.
Thank you. Russell, being a resident along RC Pines Drive, you guys did a remarkable job and the road is outstanding. So kudos. Where do we end up in terms of the total cost? Because I know we had to make the decision to fund that out of reserves, because despite the fact that 88% of us wanted to have the infrastructure fund through the referendum, but we have one individual that we're still in litigation with. So we haven't been able to raise the capital that the community wants us to raise so that we can get this work done. Where do we end up with total cost and the drawdown from reserves? And maybe that's a Victoria question for the finance section of this meeting.
That would be correct, Jim. That would be a question for Victoria on that regarding the project expenditures and so forth. We're still active and close out of the project, so there's a lot to go through there in terms of reconciling what we spent. But I would let Victoria speak to the latter part of your question.
Russell, that was an excellent punt. Beautifully done. I'm sure the Atlanta Falcons could use you on occasion. Any other questions for Russell? Seeing none, Russell, thank you very much for your help there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
I'll turn then to Amanda Sutcliffe-Jones on communication.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, board members and staff, and hello to our viewers that are watching on the live stream and those who may be watching this meeting video at a future date. Appreciate the time to give you guys a quick update this morning. I do have a couple reminders to pass from the communications department. I'll start off with a quick reminder for questions for the board during this meeting. If you have questions, please feel free to send those in to questions@csacpines.com prior to the board meeting adjournment, and then we will be able to get those read off for you. So send those in if you have them. As a quick reminder, the annual meeting, Larry mentioned it briefly early on in the meeting, but just want to remind everyone of those dates and times. Tuesday, May 3rd of this year at 10 a.m. The meeting will be available to view via live webinar. The meeting will provide the members an opportunity to receive updates from CPINE CSA on our operations and plans for the remainder of 2022 and beyond. A live question and answer session will follow immediately after the meeting has been adjourned. There will be no member voting at the annual meeting. We are working with our third-party administrator, Vote Now, like Larry mentioned a little earlier. They will handle both our mailing and our online operations, so stay tuned for that date. We are working with them to confirm the mailing date. We're hoping for April 1st, which is this coming Friday, so more information is forthcoming. As a reminder, those proxies will be sent to members who are in good standing as of the March 8th, 2022 date of record for the meeting. Moving on. From a communications perspective, just want to remind everybody of those resources that we have available for our members, our website, cpinesliving.com. We also use our Facebook page as a channel for communications as well. So that's at facebook.com/cpinesliving. And then our email communications. If you would like to sign up for our email service and you're not on it, we send regular communications to members. Feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to get you on that list. That's definitely something that we use on a regular basis to make sure we're passing information, updates on operations, services, and activities. So please contact our offices if you need to get signed up for our email system. And finally, if CSA staff can be of any assistance to you, please reach out to us. Our phone number is 843-671-1343. Our general email inbox is info@csacpines.com. You can always stop by our office during office hours, Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and our staff will be happy to take care of whatever you might need. That's my update, Larry. I'm happy to take any questions from the board this time.
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Amanda. You continue to do good work of keeping our members up to date with our weekly reports, and when necessary, bi-weekly reports if there's something going on that needs to be done. Appreciate all that work. And I do encourage anyone who is watching the video who hasn't given CSA their email, that is the best way to keep in touch with what's going on in CPINES. And when we send those out, we are pleased with how many people actually open the emails. That's the best way to know what's going on here, whether you're here or not. So thank you, Amanda. Okay, then we'll move on to Ms. Shanahan for Finance and Administration.
Sure.
And there she is.
There I am. Thanks. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, board. I'm going to be brief this morning. What's happening in the finance department, we're trying to wrap up the external independent audit, financial audit for the statements ending December 31st. Everything is going very smoothly. They haven't hit any issues. I don't anticipate any changes or recommended adjustments. Finally, I wanted to mention there are still approximately 200 property owners that have not paid their 2022 assessments. As of Monday, this coming Monday, April 4th, we're going to be cutting off their ability to not only call in a guest pass, but also to call in a pass for their rental guests. So that's kind of new this year. So we're going to get busy. Of those 273 of them rent their home on a short-term basis. Yeah. The finance department is also working with the treasurer to prepare the annual report to be presented at the annual meeting. Our administration department is working with security to help launch that security software. We hope that that's going to go live here soon. And finally, our human resources are actively recruiting for both security and maintenance positions.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah.
Any questions for Victoria?
Yeah. My question on the capital equipment, Larry, if we could.
I will address that, Jim, when I present the financial statements.
And I just like to note, every once in a while, I read on social media, or I occasionally get letters asking for more detail here or there. And, an individual member wants to know more and more. I think it's important to recognize that our financial statements are reviewed annually by auditors to make sure that we are maintaining accurate records, books and records. And so, while any individual may want to dig down even deeper than we might, as a practical matter, it's impossible for us to do that for individuals. But more importantly, I hope the community recognizes the great level of trust that we put in Victoria, and which is absolutely confirmed each year when our auditors come through with extremely clean statements as to how well the books and records are done. In fact, we regularly hear at our finance committee, which I'm sure Mr. Borghese will confirm, that our auditors come in and they're very quick because the books are in such good shape and the information is so readily available for the auditors. And that's where we need to make sure that it's done correctly. So thank you, Victoria, for the good work.
Thank you, Larry. I'd like to thank my staff as well. I couldn't do it without them.
Any other questions for Victoria on that? Thank you. We'll then move to Jared Mays on administration, operations and special project. Nope, the maintenance and facilities. I'll get it right. Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm just going to go over a couple of the maintenance division updates real quick. For our tree care division, we've trimmed approximately 80% of our leisure trails this off season, and we anticipate that to be completed by the summer season. Our carpentry and sign shop will be installing new signage on North Sea Pines Drive this spring. Our lagoon maintenance, we're continuing our weekly treatments for aquatic vegetation. Our stormwater maintenance crew has recently started a ditch clean out on Greenwood Lane, and we're going to continue to work through the drainage system on a systematic order. We recently completed Club Course Drive and several side streets off of Club Course Drive, and we will be moving to Governor's Road and the corresponding side streets next. Our roadside division, we've started some pine straw installation on selected main roadways. We have new sod and pine straw that's going to be installed near Greenwood Gate starting next week. And the CSA staff has mulched select open spaces, and we anticipate this to continue throughout the spring. Road repairs, tomorrow evening, starting around 7 o'clock, the Greenwood Gate is going to have some asphalt repairs coming up. And for those of you that have not signed up for the email, you can check out seapinesliving.com to get more information regarding that. And our facilities department, we recently painted the exterior of the CSA admin building. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jared. For what it's worth, I drove in this morning at about 9 o'clock, and there was a truck that looked like it was about a half a mile long with a lot of pine straw. I assume it was on its way in to do some of that work.
Yes. Yep.
Any questions for Jared? Seeing none, we thank you, Jared. Thank you for that report.
Yep. Thank you.
Next to David Henderson for operations and special projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just wanted to provide a few Forest Preserve updates for you this morning. The Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation was able to successfully conduct a couple prescribed burns. One was on Friday March 4th, and then a little bit more recently, this week ago, Monday, the 21st. The Forest Preserve Foundation I appreciate the community's patience and understanding and grace with this process of reintroducing the natural process of prescribed fire to the Forest Preserve. It is something that is a process. We're building better wildlife habitat. We're reducing the fuel loads. So on the off chance we were ever to have a uncontrolled wildfire, reducing those fuel loads will help mitigate that. And also at the end of the day, most people find the aesthetic of the habitat that has prescribed fire in it to be much better than one that does not. We're still in the middle of our fire season, which in this part of the country is typically the spring. So we will continue to monitor the weather. The weather parameters that are needed to successfully conduct these prescribed burns are very, very narrow in general, and especially narrow for us because of where we are and what we're surrounded by. But we are looking, weather permitting, over the next 4 to 6 weeks to conduct additional prescribed burns, and we will communicate accordingly to let the community know what's going on. But again, just want to thank everybody for all of their understanding as we go through this process. A couple other quick updates. The Wildflower field in the Forest Preserve is blooming. This is an annual initiative, and encourage you to take your guests, your friends, your family out there, should you have an hour or two to go out and enjoy some of this lovely spring weather in the Forest Preserve. One good way that you could go and see the Wildflower field is we do have our spring fundraiser, the Party in the Pines, coming up this Saturday, April 2nd from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available now online, cpinesforestpreserve.org, cpinesforestpreserve.org. And we do encourage you to purchase your tickets. Tickets will go off sale, will no longer be available starting at noon on this Thursday, the 31st. So would encourage you to go to cpinesforestpreserve.org, purchase your tickets or reserve a table for you and your party no later than noon Thursday, the 31st. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to do my best to answer any questions.
Dave, again, can you, having enjoyed the last event, it's a terrific event for the Forest Preserve, and it's a great fundraising. Is the menu available?
Yes, sir. The menu is available. I should have mentioned this earlier. The Salty Dog is once again contributing a very fine menu and very fine staff and service to this event. The menu is available, I believe. Amanda, is that also online? But we have published that menu. I know that it's out there somewhere.
It is. Yes, David, it's on the site.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Well, I want to make sure the Salty Dog was recognized, and it is. And again, for those who have been to one of these events, it's a great event, really great food. And if you haven't been, it's well worth an afternoon. Hopefully the weather will be terrific for us and we can get out and have a big crowd. So thank you, David. Next, I'll move then to Toby McSwain. Toby, you're up. There you are.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. From the security department, calls for service are on average in comparison to previous years. There has not been any major calls reported for the month of March. We did have some vandalism to street signs that occurred early in the month that has been resolved. The other calls of interest that we're dealing with are activated alarms. So far this month, we've responded to 50 calls for activated alarms. I know that when we had these previous storms here in the last several weeks back and the power went off, that was many of the calls we responded to, but we do ask the property owners to regularly take a look at their alarm system and make sure that it's functioning properly. Domestic animals running at large is continuing to be a problem. Our noise complaints have increased, as well as improper parking, and our wildlife calls have increased. The alligator courtship is beginning. With these warmer temperatures that we're having, the alligators are on the move. So please use caution when you're in and around the water's edge. And on a good note from our calls from service, we've only had 3 vehicle collisions reported for the month of March. So that's pretty good in comparison to previous time. With that, I'm sure many of you are aware of the unfortunate incident that occurred involving 2 CSA security officers. We have taken the appropriate steps and both employees were terminated. Because of the circumstances involves individuals who are employed with CSA, no other information can be that I can provide at this time. Because of our manpower shortage, we will no longer offer wildlife removal services. We have contracted with a private wildlife removal company to help us deal with alligator nuisance calls and complaints, as well as removal. So if you have a problem with an alligator, please contact security dispatch so that we can respond and make the necessary call to get this contractor here on site. If you have a problem with a raccoon or an armadillo or a squirrel, you will need to contact a company of your choice for that removal. We just don't have the staff available at this time to handle these type of wildlife calls and provide a trapping service like we normally have done in the past. Once we get our wildlife officer hired, we will let the community know that we're back up and running with full service on our wildlife. In 12 days, 23 hours, and 25 minutes, our 54th Heritage will be upon us. If you haven't purchased your tickets, you will need to do that ASAP, probably today. I would not be surprised tomorrow that they will announce that they have sold out of all the tickets for this year. My understanding, there's a few practice round tickets on Tuesday and a few daily grounds that's still available, but I look for that announcement to come out here in the next several days. So the schedule for the week of the tournament, just to go over that briefly, on Monday, there is a pro-am. There is no general spectators allowed on the golf course on Monday. Tuesday is a practice round, which is the first official day for spectators. Opening ceremony will commence at noon on the 18th green, and you'll need a ticket to attend the opening ceremony. Wednesday is our pro-am. Thursday starts tournament play. The Boeing flyover is tentatively scheduled for Saturday at 4 o'clock. Saturday is also Plaid Nation Day. So those of you who like to dress up, dress your grandkids, dress your husband or wife up in tartan, go out to the Heritage Lawn at noon. There will be a judging for the best dressed plaid outfit. Sunday is our Easter sunrise service. It will start at 7:30 underneath the Liberty Oak at Harbortown. So if you would like to attend, you do not need a ticket to attend the Easter sunrise service. But in the past, they've invited one of the players that normally will come and speak, but it's been a pretty good service. So if you're around Easter Sunday, please stop in for that. Hang tag distribution is underway if you live in the restricted areas of Harbortown. Hang tags are for residential use and they're not for your guests. So guest passes from the Welcome Center do not get your guests through a roadblock. Please use the issued hang tags that you've been given to get your guests to your home. Roadblocks will go up in place starting on Monday, week of the tournament, at 6:30 a.m. and they will remain until the play has completed at the end of the day. As a reminder, Baynard Cove Road will close next week starting April 7th and will remain closed through April 20th. Prohibited items on the golf course, please. We deal with this every year. We ask that you not bring the prohibited items to the tournament. You cannot no longer bring a Masters flag or any type of other memorabilia from another tournament or anything that does not have a RBC Heritage logo on it for autographs. The PGA Tour is no longer permitting that. Bag size, ladies can bring a clutch, which is 6 by 6 in diameter. If it's larger than that, it has to be clear, completely clear all the way around the bag. So if you're on the golf course with a prohibited item, you'll be asked to leave the golf course. No soft-sided coolers. There's no glass allowed. So if you have a party along the golf course at Harbortown and you're having a function in your backyard, you cannot bring those drinks and items onto the golf course. They must remain on your property. every year during a full build out, which this tournament is going to be. It's going to be a complete sellout as well as a build out. In 2019 and previous years, we've had an issue with underage drinking. So if you have a party that's in your backyard, please do not leave these bars unattended. I think in the last 4 years that I can recall, we have made calls to parents to come to come and claim their drunk children that are underage drinking on the golf course during the RBC Heritage. So we ask you, please help us monitor that. We do expect large crowds during the tournament. There's going to be heavy traffic here in Sea Pines. Trolley service will begin each day at 7 a.m. and will run through 10 p.m. That includes Monday, because I know there's a lot of property owners who are volunteers for the tournament that take the trolley service in. We have added additional stops during the week of the tournament. We do have flyers or the maps available for trolley service, so you can pick those up. This year, the Heritage has transitioned to a digital ticket. So each day there's no more clubhouse badges or weekly badges available anymore. It's a daily ticket. The ticket must be scanned at one of the 9 locations, and at that point you would be issued a wearable ticket for the golf course. Those locations are also listed on the RBC Heritage website. That's Honeyhorn, Liberty Oak, the main entrance to the clubhouse, Plantation and Lighthouse, which is at 1 green. Behind the driving range, there'll be a scanning checkpoint at 15 green, 12 green, 13 T will be a scanning point, 13 green as well, 16 green at Mizamas, the entrance there on the corner that leads you out to the golf course, 18 green Cemetery leading out to the fairway, and 18 green Marina and 10 fairway at Windjammer will also be a security checkpoint. So if you're staying or having a party or a function in the back of your house, you need to proceed to one of the checkpoints for your ticket to be scanned. Victoria already mentioned CSA 360. We're looking to have implemented. We are still waiting on passes and printers to arrive. The security modules have been completed. We look to probably activate our security module with the CSA 360 here within the next month, and we're really excited to get this underway. Tower Beach, we have staff currently at this time, and we'll continue as long as staffing is available. We are waiting for the new hardware that should arrive any day now to be installed, and then we will begin the issuing of the embedded RFID ID cards, which will be the new ID cards that we'll be issuing here at CSA to the property owners who wish to have access to Tower Beach. That ID card will open the gate arm for you. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have from the security department.
Toby, thank you for that very complete and full report. Obviously, the heritage is a major issue for all of us. I encourage you to encourage your friends to be respectful if they live near or on the golf course, and otherwise to try and find time to enjoy this great event for our community. Carolyn?
Toby, I've been told that once you go through the security, I mean, it's about the heritage. Once you go through the security checkpoints, which I'm glad you enumerated where they were, I appreciate that, that people will be given something to show that they've been through. Do you know what that something is? Is it a wristband? Is it a lanyard? Is it a something?
It is a wearable ticket. So every day. So if you have bought a ticket package that's good for the week, you will have to go to a checkpoint and be scanned every day in order to get onto the golf course. And then they will issue you a wearable ticket that identifies you that you've been through a checkpoint. So yes, every ticket every day has to be scanned.
Okay, thank you.
And Toby, will they give you a lanyard or something to wear around you? I mean, is that?
I do believe they will be issuing lanyards with the tickets.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Toby in terms of any of the security issues that we've been facing? Hearing none, Toby, thank you for that great report. We'll move on then to the financial reports. And Ms. Shanahan, you're back up.
Thank you, Larry. I'm going to be very brief. We're going to start with the balance sheet. Something new to bring to your attention. You'll see some inventory under the current assets. What that is we obviously order decals each year to be placed on the commercial vehicles. We are now keeping track of that through our inventory system. I'm going to jump down to the fund balance section, is more specifically the designated fund balance section. I think there's about 9 different categories that the board has designated to be set aside. So to answer Jim's question, you'll notice that third one down is called infrastructure improvements, and it's got a deficit in it of 1.387. That is the funds that we have spent in 2021 that we would have spent, the board has chosen to go ahead and spend those funds, even though we do not have the ability to collect them yet. So we are keeping track of those funds. And moving on to the income statement, again, I'm going to be very brief. We ended up the year in a deficit of just over $1 million, but with a budget of a deficit of $4 million. So that $3 million variance is made up of basically 2 things. One is a 1.3 of that is the absolute number of gate passes above budget that were sold in 2021. We are at full capacity. And finally, the capital project for the major repairs and replacements, specifically North Sea Pines Drive, which we anticipated to be finished during 2021, spilled over into 2022, leaving approximately 1.8 unspent. There are a couple variances that I did address on the face of the financial statement itself. And with that, I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions on the financial statements. If not, I would like to ask for approval.
Right.
And once they're approved, I will have Amanda post them on our website.
So in your packet, or I'm sorry, Mr. Borghese?
Yeah, Victoria, could you also explain that when you go to this page that says, that gives a list of the fund balances, you have an additional item.
I wanted to get these approved first, and then I was going to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So do we have any questions on the financial statements year to date, December 31, 2021? Seeing no questions, resolved then that Sea Pines Community Service Associates Inc. Board of Directors accepts the financial statements year to date, December 31, 2021 as presented. Is there a second for that motion? Mr. Borghese, any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hands. Any opposition? They are approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next page, as Mr. Borghese mentioned, I have broken out all those different fund balances and how they changed during the year. You'll notice that the undesignated fund ended up at almost $3 million in the positive. That's money that we don't really, I shouldn't say we don't really need it, but I hesitate. Our policy says that the undesignated needs to be a minimum of $100,000. So the finance committee is proposing that we move 1.354 out of the undesignated, with $1 million of it going into the capital reserves. And that's because we anticipate some major capital expenditures over the next couple of years, specifically the tub grinders and new trolleys. And then $354,000 to go into the emergency fund. Without getting into too many details, but our policy states that our emergency fund balance needs to be a minimum of 25% of the subsequent year budgeted operating expenditures. So we need an additional $354,000 so that we can become in compliance with our own policy. Does anyone have any questions about that? So if not, that's great. Can I get a motion to approve that transfer?
Right, so the motion is resolved. Sea Pines Community Service Associates Inc. Board of Directors, on recommendation of the Finance Committee, approves 2021 unspent funds of $1,774,557 major repairs and replacements and $109,572 capital expenditures be rolled forward to budget 2022.
You're reading the
I'm reading the wrong one.
You're reading the
Sorry.
wrong one.
Try again. 9C, I got you, okay.
Sorry.
Resolve, Sea Pines Community Service
There you go.
Associates, Inc. Board of Directors, on recommendation of the Finance Committee, approves the transfer of funds from the undesignated fund balance to the Capital Reserves Fund and the Emergency Reserves Fund in the amounts of $354,000 and $1 million respectively, as presented. Are there any questions?
There's a
Mr.
question.
Borghese? Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Borghese.
I think the intent of the Finance Committee was to have that retroactive to be effective December 31, 2021.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
Any other questions? Any other concerns with that?
So, well, the issue is if that needs to be an amendment to the motion, I so move that amendment be
Yes,
placed.
it is approval of CSA fund balance transfer as of December 31, 2021.
Which will affect the fund,
Right.
will affect the financial statements of which they approved, but it's
Right.
just a reclassification. It's not a.
This is why I went to law school instead of accounting. Any other questions or concerns with regard to this? If not, a motion to, I've got the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Pardue, all in favor, raise your hands. The motion passes.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
And
now you wanna
finally,
do-
while I still have the floor, if I can just have your attention for one more minute. As I mentioned, when I was going through the financial statements, there was approximately let's see, approximately 1.8 that was not of major repairs and replacements that was not spent in 2021. Most of that has to do with North Sea Pines Drive, so I'm asking for a budget amendment for the 22 budget to roll those funds forward. It would be for a total of $1,774,000. 1.6 of that would be attributable to North Sea Pines Drive. And Jim, to further qualify for you, that 1.6 will go against that infrastructure improvement fund. So at the end of this project, that infrastructure improvement fund will have a deficit of $3 million. So may I ask for approval of that budget amendment?
I'll read it again. Resolve amendment to the budget 2022 roll forward. Resolve, Sea Pines Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors, on recommendation of the Finance Committee, approves 2021 unspent funds of $1,774,557 major repairs and replacements and $109,572 of capital expenditures be rolled forward to budget 2022 as presented. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a second. Mr. Sharp, seconds. All in favor? Raise your hands, please. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Victoria, anything else on financial reports?
I am finished
Great, thank you very much.
for now.
Sam, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss there?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay, then we will move quickly to the committee reports. Recognizing that the committee chairman don't need to repeat what's been said by their direct report directors. So I'll move on to Mr. Borghese.
Good morning. I believe it's still morning. Finance Committee has met. Our last meeting was March 15th. At that point in time, we welcomed 3 new members to our committee, TJ Ward, Bill McConnell, and Lisa Laudermilk. And we thanked those committee members who have termed out and having served 6 years on the committee. We thank John Ferenkopf, Jack McInerny, and David Herskovitz for their service on the committee. The committee, other than having Victoria and her staff keep us on track, which we very much appreciate, we've also been looking at our financial policies, particularly with respect to capital replacement and emergency funding. And obviously the transfer of undesignated to the emergency fund of approximately $354,000 was discussed at length at our meeting. And we are in the process of reviewing the policy itself. There is a draft that the Finance Committee is looking at currently, And we believe the policy needs to be what I shall call a little more flexible with respect to the ability to spend on things that are emergency related, but not necessarily a named storm disaster. So that it gives more flexibility to use those funds when unexpected occurrences happen that are unbudgeted. We're also looking at an investment policy that currently focuses on such things as preservation of capital, liquidity, and really determines how CSA invests in financial securities, because we do have financial wherewithal in investments of between $10 and $13 million during the course of a year. Obviously, our investments increase when assessments are received at the beginning of the year, and then they are used down to what we call the normal level at the end of the year before the next rollover of assessment. So there are substantial funds. It's a very significant policy, and it is there to protect all of the property owners' investments in our community. So that's what's going on, and certainly appreciate all our members of the Finance Committee who are very active and really do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I want to echo, having sat through the Finance Committee members, they are truly talented and all have the best interest of the community at heart. So thank you. Move on then to gate entry. Mr. Corbett.
Thank you. We have our meeting of March 9. And we started off to welcome all of our two new members, Lori Allenbach and Doug Shoup. And also to thank our outgoing committee members, Andrea Bragg and Paul Crunkleton, for the years that they served on our committee. Moving on to Victoria presented gate passes sold in comparison, and these comparisons is just a short period of time because we're only 2 months into 2022 and we compared it against the prior 2 years, but the comparisons that I'll speak to reference 2001 compared to 2022, January and February. Total number of passes increased by 5%. Daily gate passes increased by 8%. Commercial passes increased by 7%. And the total number of gate passes issued at the Welcome Center, which includes business passes, Seafounds Resort passes, property owner passes, short-term rental passes, and timeshare passes increased by 4%. And our short-term rental passes in that overall increase was an increase of 7% compared to prior years. So just further reports that how busy 2022 is compared to 2021. Victoria also presented the total number of annual passes that have been issued that we just started renewing. And those have increased. And these are primarily the commercial passes that to all the different contractors and so forth. And those increased 228 compared to prior year. So that's also a pretty large increase. And the Victoria reported year-over-year historical growth of the rental code accounts at future. We had a request by one of our board members that in the months to come at our committee meetings that we do a historical growth of rental code accounts, and that'll be presented at our future meetings. Toby has already reported on the CSA 360 software. I will add that once that software is installed, there will be tutorials offered to the property owners so they can understand how to use the system and have access to it for both property owners and short-term rental owners. Toby also reported at our meeting about the ongoing discussions with regard to the improvements needed at the Greenwood Gate, Greenwood Drive, and the Club Course intersections. Those discussions and with engineers and so forth are being looked at. Nothing has been finalized to date. So that'll be ongoing for 2022. Trolley schedule, as Toby reported, one note to that is the lot 8 that will be used for the golf tournament for the short-term renters and guests of property owners will utilize lot 4 during the tournament, and that'll continue on till around the 1st of May to where the tournament will primarily finalize everything on Lot 8 by mid-May or early May. Toby also reported of his continual struggles on acquiring staff, and so that's further been noted, and hopefully we can deal with that in the future. That concludes my report. I would like to ask Steve Birdwell to give an update on the resort parking plan that Harbortown is going to implement beginning May of 22. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Before I talk about parking, I do want to just mention the quarterdeck. We are very excited to open the new quarterdeck. As you know, it's been a long time coming, and we are currently planning to open the quarterdeck next Wednesday on April the 6th. We opened our reservations lines and our online reservations exclusively to property owners over the weekend. And we've had tremendous response and support, and we appreciate the community's support of the new quarterdeck. Really looking forward to it. But I know there's a lot of concern and interest in parking in Harbortown, which has been at capacity for many years, as you know, and we have been working on that. We've got two initiatives that we think will help alleviate some of the congestion in Harbortown. First, beginning at the beginning of May, all employees in Harbortown will be asked to park remotely. And we have purchased several new vehicles, and we'll be beginning continuous employee shuttles to Harbortown, to and from Harbortown. So throughout the day, and we've had good support from all merchants in Harbortown, and we think it's going to open up somewhere between 150 to 200 spaces that will be available to property owner parking and guest parking. It's roughly a third of the parking spaces in Harbortown that have been taken from employees. So that's a big initiative. I think it's going to really be popular. Also, we have a new valet parking service that will begin in Harbortown. So property owners and guests will be able to pull up to the curb, come around the loop in Harbortown, and park, turn their cars over to valet, a 5-star valet. There in Harbortown, they're going to be using a portion of the gravel parking lot in Harbortown to park cars. The initial cost is $10 per car. I think it'll be wildly popular. It's going to be very convenient. 5-star has been offering valet parking in several places on the island. We've partnered with them for special events for many years. There is a text messaging process where you'll be given a phone number that you can text when you're ready to pick up your car, and you could give them 10 minutes notice, and they should have your car pulled around for you. So we will be offering also enforcing the parking restrictions in Harbortown for employees. We've got as I mentioned, all the merchants are supporting the process, and we think these two services will be really help alleviate some of the concerns of parking in and around Harbortown.
Very good. Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions for Kerry? Seeing none, thank you, Kerry, for that excellent report. And thank you, Steve. I do hope this parking initiative helps to alleviate some of the concerns that we've had in the past and which are likely to be added to with the great new restaurants you guys are opening. So congratulations on that, by the way. Governance, Mr. Caskey.
Thank you. Just a quick update that we had some turnover as described within the committee guidelines that we all advanced and approved for last year. Welcoming new members. We have 9 volunteer property owners plus members of the board. So collectively, there's probably a dozen of us at any time, all owning property, all interested in advancing the organization. We spent the first part of this year really kind of recapping all the policies and procedures that the governance committee recommended and were approved by the board to make sure that they were implemented. So the conflict of interest and disclosure forms were implemented and completed. The committee guidelines were adopted and shared across all the committees as we embarked on the new calendar period. We instituted the confidentiality pledge within the committee structures. to make sure that we can have the level of dialogue and discussion at our committee meetings. Implemented, as we already referenced, the electronic voting for the directors. Now we're doing proxy, and we're hoping we'll continue that process to other activities to include potential future referendum. And the board completed at the end of the year self-assessment to look at itself introspective. How can we improve governance processes? How can we improve? And so the board is deliberating as we move forward the lessons learned from that survey. So 21 was a very active year for a governance committee, and I applaud my colleagues on the board for the implementation of all of the various recommendations that were made. This year, we are taking a little bit of a breather in terms of policy and practice, and we're really looking at the question, how do we update our thinking around the mission, vision, and that guide us at CSA. And that includes, we have a mission statement within Sea Pines Living that is to protect, maintain, and enhance the resources of Sea Pines for the benefit of the Sea Pines community. What we want to do is have a discussion of an aspirational vision, and then also look at our values. So that's where we are as we work this year. Any questions?
Any questions for Jim? I think it's worth noting, having sat through all the committee's first meetings, or almost all, that all followed the request to sign the confidentiality statements. And I think almost all of our members have done that, which is very important for allowing for open and critical dialogue at the committee level, where final actions can't be taken, but where recommendations can be made to the board. So thank you for that work, Jim, and for the work of your committee. Next is land use management. Mr. Thompson.
Greg, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you. We're off to a good start this year in land use management. We have a draft of a policy for the roadside barriers issues. I'm going to make this very brief. I just want to reiterate and reinforce my thanks to Dana and also acknowledge how much she'll be missed as a member of our committee. Russell did a great job with his overview, and I'm going to leave it there unless somebody has a question.
Any questions for Greg on land use management? Just keep up the good work. I know there's a lot of work being done and to make sure our community maintains our community maintains itself as a high-class place to live and visit. So thank you. Maintenance and enhancement, Tom Sharp.
Yes, good morning, all. I'd like to start with a real quick thank you again in recognition to Russell and his team, and Amanda for their work on the North Sea Pines project. I've overseen a lot of construction projects, and this has been done very nicely. I happen to live in the neighborhood, and the traffic management was wonderful. Also, I have noted a great working relationship between the Mulpus Utilities and Blythe Construction, and Russell and Sam's relationship with them. That helps things go along quite well. In terms of the Maintenance, Enhancement, and Major Projects Committee, we've reorganized. We started our meeting. We have about 12 members. We reorganized our efforts this year. And why did we do that? Well, previously we've been doing what I would call a review and comment procedure with the staff. And it was felt that with the resources on the committee, we probably could contribute a little bit more if we had an active engagement role. So that being the case, we decided to form 3 subcommittees, task force within the major committee, and we'll work on 3 projects this year. In the maintenance area, under Jared's review, is we're going to work on debris pile and the pickup to see what we can do in this area to have some cost savings, to maybe have it look a little bit nicer for our community. There are problems that Jared and his staff work with daily in terms of issues and complaints, and we'd like to see if we come through with a change in the procedure. So that's being analyzed. The second area is in the enhancement area, if you will. And again, that's in Jared's area. But another area that we spend a lot of time on, his staff spends a lot of time on, is mailboxes in our community. And as you note, we have different shades of green. We have different shades of, or not shades, but we have leaning mailboxes. We have miscellaneous mailboxes. And to get those replaced is a somewhat of a laborious process. So we want to look at that and see whether we can make that look a little bit better for our community. So a group of 4 people will be working on that under Jared's leadership. The third area, we've covered that pretty well, that's Russell's area, is our critical infrastructure program. And I guess we can say we probably have a 9-year remaining program, but basically this group will be working on formalizing, and this I think is important, formalizing a remaining 9-year program where we're spending upwards of $5 million a year. But we need to detail this for our residents that have given us these funds by year and by dollar. And I think we need to be able to say with some projection what we're going to do in year 7, year 8, year 9, and show our residents what we've done. Actually, and then we would report against that and say, for example, North Sea Pines, we plan to do this, it costs, and Victoria would have an example of comparison. But I think it's very important that we put a 9-year plan together. This group will also be working on, are there ways that we can look at our projects, perhaps do them in a more efficient process in terms of scheduling or planning. It takes a lot of time to bring a contractor into our community. And as Russell indicated, we're hauling asphalt from quite a distance and moving equipment in and taking equipment out, setting up things like this. So we're going to look at that. We have a fine consulting engineering firm that's helped us with some priorities. And I guess the last part of this would be working with Amanda to put together a good communications program as to the status of our critical infrastructure program, so that we're feeding back to our community with what we have accomplished and spent their money. So these 3 groups will work, and by August, we're going to ask for proposals to be presented to the full board for review and action. In some cases, there may be some capital requirements that would have to be planned for. So that's it at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom and about the work of his committee, which I know will be extremely active and is particularly important in light of the passage of the critical infrastructure referendum, where we have a specific amount of money dedicated to specific projects. Your committee will be very important in giving confidence to the community that we are using their money well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is safety and security, safety, security, and transportation. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my report, most of our materials have already been covered by Mr. McSwain, Mr. Corbett, and Mr. Birdwell. I will reemphasize that we are extremely concerned with our ability to give Toby the full staffing that he needs to give us the resources to give us the quality of life that we want here in Sea Pines. I would like to report that all of our committee members have signed the confidentiality report. I want to thank outgoing members on the committee, Scott Callahan, Nancy Eldridge, and Felice Lamarca. And I'd like to welcome our new members, Steve Alford, Robbie Ames, Bill McConnell, and Bill Sullivan. Our next meeting will be April 26th, Mr. Chairman. That's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any questions for Bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation Advisory Board. Mr. Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wait. I think we got a little extra music there.
I'm sure
David
that was
did
unrelated.
David's done a very nice job of forest management. The burn program is working well. Habitat improvement is considerable. We have two things to mention. One is that we are finalizing a master plan based on the input that we received from Sea Pines Resort. We will submit that to the committee next month and probably the following month back to the board for approval. We are also in the process of putting together a budget for improvements to Fish Island. That would include things like the bicycle path and the modern toilet facilities on the island. And I should have that available within about a month. And that's my report.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie on the Sea Pines Forest Preserve Advisory? We thank those folks for taking on a big responsibility and taking an active role in helping us to improve that incredible gem of an asset that we have in the Forest Preserve. So thank you.
Yep.
Next up is short-term rental, Mr. Ellis.
Well, good morning, everyone. I guess a lot of our matters that come before short-term rental are going to be addressed with short-term rental are going to be taken up in a little bit under the revenue sources proposal and discussions. As to the number of visitors and other matters that's already been given by staff, there's not a lot for me to add there. I do want to call everybody's attention to the fact that the Hilton Head Town Council Committee on Short-Term Rentals have made their recommendation, and it's going to be considered at the April 19th meeting of the Town Council. People who are interested in that can sign on to the town's website and specifically earmark that as one of the topics they want to be made aware of. And in fact, this morning while we were in the meeting today, there was one of those notices came through which kind of summarized what the town is considering. I hesitate to mention this, but only because I've received some communications that it might relate to short-term rental, but I have gotten communications on the Picasso platform as it might or might not involve a short-term rental. And that's really not the issue as much there. So, and it is being looked at by other areas and other resources in the CSA. I will leave that, but other than mention it because it's been brought to my attention, I didn't want to ignore it. Other than that, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions.
Any questions for David? Seeing none, we will move on then to David Pardue and strategic planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since our last board meeting, we've had a strategic planning workshop and one full regular committee meeting. It's a terrific group, and we've had some spirited debates on various issues. The staff, as usual, has been great, headed by Sam, but also with great work from Amanda Jones and Stephanie Farrow. What we're trying to do is to update the 2018 strategic plan. As I previously said, there are a lot of things in the 2018 plan that have now been done, and so they can be eliminated, plus some other things that we can add and update. There's some let's say different debate within our committee on, let's say, two areas, and that is that the staff and supported by me and have been mainly focusing on things that might be considered operational issues rather than long-term true strategic planning, because it's the view of some of us that Sea Pines is kind of already what it is and isn't going to considerably change. And so the best strategic plan is just to continue the best operations that we can and continue to raise the money that we need. Others on the committee want to take more of a long-term dreaming, and I'm not meaning to use the word dreaming loosely. I'm just saying they want to think more as far as dream about what we may or may not be, 10 or 15 years from now, and kind of discuss what we're going to do when we grow up. So it's a great debate. It's a great the discussion group, and we're just trying to come up with a proper balance on those two issues. I would love to have anybody's other comments. If you want to tell me now or email me if you've got any suggestions on any of those topics. That would be terrific. So, and that concludes my report.
Larry, unmute.
Any questions for David Pardue? Thank you. Seeing none, I will move this into unfinished business. Before I do, I want to remind those who are watching today that you can ask questions of the board at questions@csacpines.com. We'll take all questions up to the point of adjournment here, and we will answer the questions that have been posed to us immediately following adjournment. Our unfinished business is these. I'll do that after. Is the Sea Pines Revenue Task Force. As a historical note, I appointed a revenue task force back last year to study the potential for raising additional revenues to meet the additional operating requirements that we're facing. At the time, it was clear that we were short on our security and maintenance staffs, and we were facing what was at that point some inflationary impact on our salaries, which have clearly now been greatly enhanced as the labor shortage and the increase in salaries was growing. The Revenue Task Force had general data on which to make decisions as to where the needs were. But until the board actually adopted or chose to move forward with any of the proposals, I wasn't going to put the staff under the gun to do the really difficult digging work to establish where the needs were and where the causes might be. In November, the board did in fact decide to move forward on 3 of the Revenue Task Force proposals: a new potential transfer fee for transferring membership when homes are sold, a business license fee on those who rent their homes on a short-term basis, and some increases in gate fees either at the daily level and or at the annual level on annual passes. Since then, we've heard from a number of members of the community that they wanted to see more data establishing where the needs were, what the cost, what the real anticipated costs would be to satisfy those needs, and where the expense causers were.
Okay, you were blurred. Your vision was blurred. It's clear now.
Okay, that's someone's probably tired of looking at me. Thank you, David. And today, my intent is to have the staff present that data, but we are not going to take up any further action on any of the Revenue Task Force proposals. My hope is that over the next 6 weeks, the board members who are seeing this data for the first time will have a chance to digest it, and that the community also will have a chance to digest it, with the goal of actually making something happen in May. Coincidentally, I had a chance to go back and look at the very first letter to the community that I wrote back when I first became chairman in January 2020. My letter of February 2020 read as follows: "We've been discussing our goals and objectives for the coming year, and at the very top of the list is finding a satisfactory funding mechanism that will allow us to move forward in fixing, maintaining, and upgrading our crumbling critical infrastructure. With an overwhelming majority of residents recognizing those needs and willing to fund them, this board is no longer going to kick the can down the road." That board did in fact take action, which resulted in the critical infrastructure referendum, which passed unanimously and of course is now stuck in litigation. But the point is, we took on the task to meet the needs of the community. That only covered infrastructure. Since then, it's been quite clear to this board and the community that we have equally shortfalls in our operating revenues. Why? Because we have an assessment that is fixed to on an increased basis only to the national CPI of last year, which doesn't reflect in any way, shape, or form the CPI that we live with here in Sea Pines. We'll go through some of those today. I'm hoping that at the end of the session, the community and the board will be further along in recognizing where the needs are and some of the costs. I understand that not everyone's going to be happy with whatever choices we make. We have an incredibly diverse community that we are trying to please. We have people who occupy their homes on a full-time basis, a virtually full-time basis, and those who only occupy sometimes. We have folks who own and operate their homes as short-term rentals on a virtually full-time basis, and those who only do sometimes and otherwise occupy. We have commercial interests who have a different view of what the population should be in terms of visitors. At the end of the day, though, we have to make decisions that are going to meet the community as a whole. I think everyone who lives here and owns property here, or who works here and has a business here, wants Sea Pines to be a safe, family-friendly environment. The people who rent on a short-term basis want their renters to be coming to a place where they feel safe and in a family-friendly environment, as it has been for the last 50 years, and as I think most of us hope it will be for the next 50 years. But that means we have needs that are not being satisfied under our current revenue sources, and we can identify some of the areas where those needs are being created based on changes in the way that our property owners are using their properties. And so today, I'm hopeful to be able to provide data that will help us come to conclusions over the next several months as to where we'll find the additional revenue. Why, Amanda, do you want to go ahead and start the presentation?
I'll do it.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to do it from here. With that introduction, we have put together a PowerPoint presentation, which we're going to share with the community. It will be sharing it with the board today. It will also be posted on our seapinesliving.com website. And those who aren't watching the meeting today will see it on their video. Can we minimize the people on the right?
Yep.
Thank you. Can you all see that? Someone say yes?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So what is the current situation that we're facing? We know that we have a record high occupancy, both because over the last couple of years, thanks to COVID, many property owners are using their property on a more regular basis. They aren't going home, they're working from here, or they've actually decided to live here on a more permanent basis. That's in large part, it's also due to property owner guests, an increasing number of short-term rental properties, and a larger number of visitors coming through the gate. We have our traffic and asset management has become very, very difficult. Greenwood Ocean Gates and traffic patterns in these areas have not been addressed. And although they need to be due to lack of funding, traffic conditions continue to be an issue. If you are using your property at any time during the year, you will find that traffic is consistently a difficult problem at certain times of the day, and we need to find solutions there. Sea Pines gates are at capacity. In addition, our demand for Sea Pines services have increased. For better or worse, we are the first line of security for our community. The town doesn't have its own police force, and Beaufort County Sheriff is itself grossly understaffed. Toby's told us any number of times that they have an even greater staffing shortage than we do. And candidly, we are at the very end of an island, which is at the very end of the county. And so to get the Sheriff's Department to respond to issues where we have a police force of our own they're the secondary force to come in line. So our Sea Pine security team is our first line of defense as a security police force. We also have land use management and compliance issues. Thanks to the land use management rules that we adopted last year and the enforcement mechanisms, we are seeing a higher level of compliance when the problems are brought to their attention, but we need to have staff to do that. Next slide, please.
I don't know why it's not.
All right. Working on these slides, sorry, folks.
I don't know why it's not.
Pull it back in. Stephen's working.
There we go.
Okay.
All right, excellent.
Thank you, Stephen.
As I noted earlier, the critical infrastructure referendum, which passed overwhelmingly, was specifically tailored to critical infrastructure: roads, bridges, leisure trails, beach access points, and the drainage system. It is not available to meet other operating expenses and other capital issues, less those that weren't considered critical in that referendum. Next, please. And that's important to know, which is why we're here. So where are the needs that we need to address that are currently not being fulfilled? And with that, I'll turn it over to Sam and Victoria.
Thank you, Larry. What we tried to do was with the data analysis is create a couple of a benchmark in 2015 and work through 2021. And we were able to do that for total calls for service. And then we took 2015 data numbers, and I say we, it was actually Victoria that did the bulk of this work. We took the 2015 numbers and we parsed them down call by call. And then we did the same thing for the 2021 numbers. So 2020, excuse me. So our numbers are based on comparisons of 2015 and 2020. We did not do 16, 17, or 18, 19. It would have been too much time and effort to go through the thousands and thousands of those calls. But we used our most recent full year at the time, and we used our 2015 numbers. So when we talk in terms of calls for service in the benchmark, we're starting in 2015, working through 2020. We know that we had a record year last year. We all believe that we're going to have a record year this year. So we expect the trend to continue. As a note, we also, when we see the orange line at the bottom of this slide, that line is specifically, that represents our patrol officers, certainly not to scale. But in 2015, we had 21 patrol officers slotted in the safety and security budget.
You can't see me.
It's okay. In 2015, we had 21 patrol officers, and we just used patrol officers because patrol officer positions, excuse me, that's the wrong number. We had 18 patrol officer positions in 2015, and that is the same number of patrol officer positions we have currently. So as you can see, in the patrol, I use patrol officers because those are the officers that provide the services and answer the service calls. So our staffing levels in terms of patrol officers have not increased over the course of since 2015. So having said that, I will ask Victoria to take over, and since she has mined the data for us, and walk the board and the community through this presentation.
Okay, this first slide is showing us that the calls for service for security services specifically have increased to a little over 20,000 in 2017 to over 35,000 in 21. Yet the number of patrol officers that are answering these calls has not moved. So we are asking more and more and more of our patrol personnel as these calls for service continue to increase. Next slide, please.
You got it. There you go.
Okay, so we looked at from 17 to 21, we looked at the line in gray the line in blue is your calls for service. As I mentioned, a little more than 20,000 to in excess of 36,000. And we compared those to the short-term rental passes issued. As you can see, it started off in 17, a little over 50,000. In 2021, it was over 85,000. Both of those lines increased 68% over that 5-year period. So that's very interesting that they both increased at the same level. All right. So then.
Next slide. There you go.
Whoops. Did we skip one? Okay. So these are the types of calls that we're talking about. Wow, I'm not going to read them all because you all can read. So you've got, fireworks, vehicle jump starts, burglary. These are the types of calls that security personnel is addressing. So then we decided to focus on the calls that, next slide.
Yeah.
let's focus on the calls that we can associate with renters. So that would be noise complaints, improper parking, and covenant violations. And let me just address a covenant violation. That is not a land use monitor violation. This is more like you're leaving things on the beach, or there are too many bicycles in your front yard. You're parked all over the place. These covenant violations are called into security and addressed by the security staff. So it's interesting that so we looked at that, as you see that 2020 spike, as Sam mentioned, that's why we chose 2020 to really focus on, because of that big spike in 2020. And we decided to go back 5 years and compare. So I actually opened up every single complaint that had to do with noise complaints, improper parking, and covenant violations for both the years 2020 and the years 2015. So let's talk about improper parking. Now, your green is 2020 numbers. Your blue is 2015 numbers. I opened up, that's supposed to say no indication, sorry. It was late last night. So I opened up every report to see if I could make a determination as to who was causing the problem. Was it a contractor? Was it a property owner? Or was it a short-term rental guest? As you can see that first line, sometimes I just couldn't determine who it was. It might be a day visitor, it might be an employee. I just couldn't determine from reading the report who was causing the problem. You'll see that at the bottom, though, that calls associated with rentals is 2020 compared with 2015 is a 53% increase in security calls related to improper parking. Okay. We looked at covenant violations, the same deal. There were several of them. I couldn't determine who was doing the violation, so I indicated that as no indication. Looked again, calls definitely associated with property owners. Look at that, calls that was definitely associated with rentals. That's 143% increase in security calls. And finally, noise complaints. Again, some of them I couldn't determine. Property owners actually went down. The 237% increase in security calls related to noise complaints related to short-term rental guests.
Victoria?
Yes.
This is Jim Caskey. Just a quick question when you say you went through the reports. So you're able to determine on a security report that the officer arriving is dealing with people that are renting the house versus a homeowner.
Right, the verbiage might say, I spoke with the renters.
Okay. All right. So there's a level of specificity and accuracy in these numbers that focus in on a growing problem with the rental population.
Absolutely, and I was extremely conservative. I made sure it was absolutely sure that it was a rental guest.
And Jim, again, I think that there's no doubt that nothing is perfect, but it seems clear that the increase in number of calls and the increase in the need for security is driven in large measure by the increase since 2015 in short-term renters. And we know for a fact, based on the number of passes that have done, that over the last 5 to 7 years, we've gone from a relatively stable number of rental properties to a significantly growing number of properties. And that's okay. We don't have the authority to stop people from renting their homes. And so we have to live with that situation, and we have to recognize that situation. And we have to do what we can as a board, in my view, to maintain the same lifestyle through additional security and additional personnel that assures that we are keeping the lifestyle that we want, notwithstanding the increase in the number of complaints that we're getting involved to a large degree, but not entirely involved, from the increase in short-term renters. And again, my intent is not to say short-term rentals are bad, but let's face it, they come in for a week, they're on vacation, They are not aware of the rules. You wouldn't expect them to be aware of the rules. They may not have as much sensitivity to rules. They're here to have a good time. So if they're going to violate our rules, we want to have the ability to bring them back into compliance, and we don't have that now with the staff. So I'm going to turn now to Sam to talk about the staffing challenges.
Thank you, Larry. As most of the board knows, all the board knows, and most of the community knows, the time now for us to be hiring is a tough one. There's a lot of competition going on, particularly for security officers. Just a reminder, our officers are sworn officers. And so when we're looking for someone to fill that position, we are looking for someone who has the capacity to act as a law enforcement officer. We're not talking about gate attendants specifically with these presentations, but we do have a need for gate attendants, but the gate attendants aren't sworn officers. We compete with not just the other planned communities on the island for these folks. We compete with Beaufort County, with Bluffton, with the town of Hilton. Town of Hilton, they have no police force. With the town of Beaufort, with the city of Savannah. So that really is our market for the folks that are willing to do this job. And the other challenge we have that wasn't necessarily there just 3 or 4 years ago is the nature of law enforcement. As everyone recognizes, it has become a much more, there's a much more focus on law enforcement in the communities and around the nation. And there are not as many folks that have a desire to get in law enforcement because of the events of the last couple of years. So, our pool of folks that we're competing with against these other communities and other towns is shrinking. And so these other folks, these other organizations are offering higher hourly rates and signing on and staying on bonuses. So we have some significant challenges to get folks to come to work here at CSA as it relates to security because of those things, not to mention that we are the last stop in the state of South Carolina when it comes to law enforcement. It's just where we're positioned. So for someone to come to work for us at the security level, they drive past every other opportunity I just mentioned to get to our job. And so we have to have a reason to keep our folks here, as well as to attract the new folks to come and be security officers so that they're willing to come and put the gun on, and hope we never have to use that, but put the gun on and act in that utmost capacity of being the first line of defense for anything criminal that happens here, and then all those other things they're required to do as it relates to land use management, covenant violations, those things. So that's what we're dealing with when it comes to security, recruiting security officers. We have to improve our position in that market for security officers, for law enforcement officers. And there are some ways that we think we need to do it. The first and foremost is raising salaries significantly. Larry, go to the next slide, please.
And Sam, before we do something you always remind me, both as to land use management rules and as to security, our goal is not to enforce rules. Our goal is to be present so that we have compliance.
It's always compliance.
And in the absence of security, it's very much like any highway you drive down or Greenwood Road on any given moment. If people don't see security, the speeds go up. When they see security on a regular basis, the speeds stay reasonable. And the same thing is we're looking for here. When we have a lot of visitors and short-term renters and guests, if we have virtually no presence of security, the likelihood is they won't know what the rules are, or they won't care, or they'll violate the rules unintentionally, and there's no way to stop that. If we have enough security forces and land use managers out there, I believe we can maintain the lifestyle that we want, which is people who unintentionally violate the rules, when told they are violating them, will comply.
Another way to describe it, Larry, is what we're looking for in addition to law enforcement officers, and just as important to CSA and the Sea Pines community, is we're looking for customer service agents for this community. The presence that they have is to deter crime, to deal with violations, and do it in a way that we get compliance. But at the end of the day, if there is a need, and we have had occasion recently to have a need where we need a sworn law enforcement officer to a scene immediately to deal with a very challenging situation, then where a badge and a gun is required, then we got to have these folks, and that they're the first line. But it's always, we're trying to get compliance first and foremost, and doing it in a way that they represent the community in the light that our property owners want, that our businesses want, the resort wants, and that we're all proud of. So
this is the next slide.
Jim Kasky here again.
Yes,
Before, you present through the cause and effect of increased rental and all that, a huge demand. How are you even able to respond to those levels of requests for service? Either we were terribly overstaffed in 2015, or there are long delays for security response. You don't see them on the road doing traffic enforcement. I mean, what are the cause and effect? I mean, how are they even doing this level with the same number of staff?
Well, Jim, it's a great question. It really boils down to use a term you're familiar with. It becomes call triage. So
yeah.
we have to rank and prioritize our calls. So if a security officer is dealing with a noise violation or a covenant violation, and there is a criminal incident going on, then they're going to drop that and they're going to deal with it. And so I couldn't tell you how many calls that we weren't able to pick up that we didn't write a report on because we weren't able to get to the call in time. So it really is triage, and that is not how we want to run our community. We don't want to have to triage calls. If a property owner, a short-term renter, a visitor, a guest, a business inside the gates of Sea Pines calls for a security need, a covenant need, whatever the need is, but calls our dispatch office, we want and must have the ability to get an officer there and get a resource there to help them. That is our first line of responsibility, and we're struggling with that right now. That's as you can see, that's what our challenges are associated with the large increase in calls and the lack of increase in officers to answer those calls.
Yeah, and
Jim, put a different way, in 2015, our assessment dollars were probably enough to maintain a staffing level that was adequate for the occupancy of Sea Pines at the time. When you almost double the number of short-term renters and therefore the increase in number of calls, and have an increase in visitors, and you have an increase in property owners, you end up needing more people, but we don't have the funds to do it.
Yeah, and Larry, I just think that's maybe something we need on behalf of the community to develop a little more understanding of the concept of triage of what's happening. So, because Sam, to your point, I mean, I ran hospitals. So if we had 10 nurses in the emergency room and we had 100 patients, we were okay. If we had 200 patients, you had a 5-hour wait. So it's a real, I think, capturing that thought of this gap that results in service and triage, it probably is a message we need to develop within this material.
Sam?
Yes, I don't know who it was, but I'm here.
Yeah, Sam, this is Toby. Let me interject something because you guys are presenting something in 2015. I'm going on my 9th year. I started in 2013. In the 9 years that I have been here, CSA security has been fully staffed 3 months of my career that I've been here. So when you look at 2015 numbers, you're not looking at a full staff of employees. We've had 3 consecutive months that we've been at full staff in 9 years.
Thank you, Toby.
And that's what we're coming to next, because what we've got to do with our existing employees is get our salaries up to a position where we are the leading agency to recruit the best security officers, but just as importantly, if not more importantly, to retain the best security officers, the folks that we have. That really is where this begins for us. And then working into adding the additional security officers we believe we need so that we're not triaging calls, that we're able to respond in a timely manner, and the officers can be seen as a presence and a resource around the community versus running from one call to the next. Additionally, you'll note that on occasion, more than we like, you will see a security officer working a gate. Coming on board 2 years ago, my goal is to move completely away from that. That's not the best use of those security officers. And quite frankly, our gate attendants are more customer service focused. So we want our gate attendants, we want to have enough gate attendants so we don't have to pull an officer off the road because we don't have the gate staffed appropriately or have enough gate employees. So it's not just the pressures that the officers have in terms of dealing with the volume of calls. It is when the gate attendant is not available, that gate has to be staffed. And then it becomes triage of positions. So we're moving officers from patrol to go run the gate. Sometimes we have the lieutenant run the gate or the captain on occasion. Before long, Toby will be out there. So we need additional gate attendants so we can keep those patrol officers on the road answering the calls where they need to. Additionally, with the increase in our land use management requirements and the regulations, rules and regulations that we've adopted, there are better uses for the security officers than going to some of those calls. Those really are more of an administrative function. And so I believe we need to add additional staff there. Right now, we're staffed from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. We need to get to where most of those calls are. I shouldn't say most of them. Most of the immediate calls for covenant violations occur during the beginning of the week when we have the short-term rental turnover for folks that we're having to educate on what the rules and regulations are in the community. So those 3 areas are how this all has to work together so that we can meet the needs of the community based on the volumes of call for service we're seeing. And the way to do that is to provide the highest competitive compensation we can, retain the employees we've got. And then outside of what we're talking about now, these are operational things. We will need to reconfigure the gates and the facilities associated with gate pass sales sometime soon in the future, 2 years, 3 years, whenever it is, we can adopt the additional resources to do that, to help make us more efficient in how we're running our gates and how we're utilizing our employees. That piece is down the road. That's really not part of what we're talking about here. Larry, if you'll go to the next slide. Just to give the board and the community an idea of what our introductory salaries are right now. And then you can see what we're competing against with Beaufort County, the town of Hilton Head. And I've included the town of Hilton Head there. If you look at their seasonal positions, and these are part-time positions, but the town is paying $20 and $25 an hour for monitoring the beach and $25 an hour for monitoring beach parking. And those are this is not a knock at those positions, but those folks aren't going to be required to have a gun and a badge and go through the law enforcement screening and requirement and deal with the issues that our security officers have to. So you can see very clearly the market that we're competing against at the end of the day and the cost of labor and what's driving it. There are many other examples we could include in this, but these are just short and sweet. It really tells you the labor market and the cost of labor that we're dealing with here in Sea Pines and on Hilton Head Island.
And before we go to the next slide, it's worth reminding what the first slide on this issue was. We have to not only find the best people, but we have to find the best people who are willing to come all the way to Sea Pines, as opposed to stopping in any one of the other jurisdictions that they might pass, not getting over the bridge and all. And because our security officers are both security officers and they are welcome people. We want folks who are not sitting in, with God bless me, for New York City. We're not looking for New York City cops who are basically there to have one image. We're looking for an image of Sea Pines. And so you're really looking for the highest and best. And that means paying the highest and best.
The analogy I would use, Larry, and this is, forgive me for using this, y'all. I'm not looking for Rambo to come to work for us.
Right.
I'm not looking for Barney Fife to come to work for us. what I really want is I want Andy Taylor to come to work for us, Sheriff Taylor, who's right there in the middle, who's looking to find solutions without ever having to draw his gun. He's looking to bring folks together and handle things that way. That's a bit of a different mindset, but it takes special folks to do that. So but that's what our community needs. That's the way our community functions. And those are the kind of folks we've got to find and mentor and encourage and bring on board with us.
You did a much better job of coming up with the right analogy. Thank you, Sam. Next slide.
So the question becomes, what are we talking about in terms of dollars? Because that's at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about for us, is trying to figure out how do we pay the folks we have in order to keep the ones the folks that are doing the best job for us, and then the additional positions we think we need to bring on. And so you can see on this slide, the first section really revolves around what we think we need to do in terms of compensation and increases in the specific areas. We will not get into discussions about individual salaries. These are the gross numbers that we think we need in those specific areas. And then you roll down to what we think we need in addition to add to deal with the calls of service that we showed you from the very first slide, the 68% increase in calls of service. And you roll those numbers together with the additional vehicles and equipment we need. So we're in the range of $1.7, $1.8 million for safety, security, and LUM operations to keep the same level of calls of service and the same ratio to the number of employees handling those calls for service. So, Mr. Chairman, that's where we are. I hope that's helpful to the board and the community to understand the challenges that we're facing right now. I do want to give an absolutely shout out to our safety and security folks. Toby mentioned we had a very unfortunate incident a couple of weeks ago. Far and away, the men and women that work for safety and security are outstanding folks, and they do a tremendous job for us. And I'm grateful for the men and women that come to work and work safety and security and work our gates each day, because of it is a tough job, and we are very appreciative of the work they do. And I will leave it there and turn it back over to you, Larry.
Thank you. So how are we funded today, and why do we need additional resources? Today, our funding comes from essentially three sources. Our resident property owner assessment, which is limited to the national CPI, which has no relationship to the cost of doing business here. You can see just from the increase in the current salaries to the needed salaries that a CPI adjustment doesn't do it. It worked for a long time, but as Sea Pines has become fully occupied, a large amount of that increase being outsiders, visitors, whether they're renters or dailies. The CPI assessment simply cannot cover our increased costs. And the only way to change that is through a referendum, which has two challenges. One is the legal issue that we're fighting today over the critical infrastructure, which I am confident we will win and be confirmed. But then just finding 75% of the population that agrees with the needs has proven in the past to be difficult. I'm hopeful that the trend we created with the critical infrastructure assessment referendum is the right trend, but 75% with the number of times it has failed is a very difficult hurdle. We have the commercial and resort annual assessments, which are under the same issue. And then we have our gate revenues, which are allowed under the gate entry policy, where we have three different parties whose interests need to be addressed. And so I'm hopeful that some gate revenue can be increased. That's a matter that's difficult to assure. So
Larry, could I make one other comment?
Yeah, sure.
I want to make sure I'm making this clear to the board and particularly the community. This is not a criticism or a knock at short-term rentals, visitors, guests. We're just presenting the facts of what we're dealing with at the level to provide for the needs of those renters, guests, visitors, property owners, commercial and resort. Sea Pines is a resort community. It's always been here for visitors. It's always been here for short-term rentals. And we want to continue to meet that need and the responsibilities that CSA was assigned in 1988 as this community has changed. That is that is, at the end of the day, that is what our goal is with everything we're talking about right now, is to meet the needs of this community at all levels, with the challenges we face today with the vast popularity of this community. It's a special place. It's an amazing place, and we want it to continue to be that. And we want to play our role in that by providing these services in the way they need to be provided.
So what's next? Today, I certainly want to have a discussion from anyone who has questions on any of the materials you've been presented, but I do not want to necessarily take up any specific proposal of the Revenue Task Force. They remain on the table. On the table is a transfer fee. On the table is a licensing fee for those who rent their homes on a short-term basis. And on the table are additional gate revenues. I want to note, because I think it's important to remember, we are asking those who tend to create the needs, which is our short-term renters and guests and visitors, to pick up a substantial portion of the increased costs. Homeowners are paying, property owners are paying the assessments, which covers a substantial part of the cost. And indeed, as I think we've discussed, if we didn't have this large increase in population, much of which is driven by renters and visitors, we might not have as much of a need for additional security and costs. So I think if we continue to focus on the fact that most of the increased revenue sources will be coming from outsiders and not from property owners, because they are covering costs created, I think hopefully that will bring the community together. But those are issues that I'm not going to ask you to vote on today. Over the next 6 weeks, we'll present some bylaws that would allow us to, if we choose to institute these fees. And I'm hoping at the May meeting, the board will come to some decisions as to where the revenue is. As I indicated earlier, we have a very diverse population, and we are not going to be able to please everyone. There will be people who understand the needs and are willing to pay for them. There'll be others who simply haven't been convinced. But this board, just as we did with the critical infrastructure referendum, we can't kick this can down the road any further. Sea Pine's life, it will deteriorate if we continue at the current level of staffing. And that assumes we can keep the current level of staffing in light of the inflationary impact on salaries and the shortage in work side. So I think it's incumbent on the board to act. Where we act and how we act is a matter we'll take up at the next several board meetings. With that, I'll open this up to questions. I know it's a long presentation, but if anyone has any questions, concerns, thoughts about what was presented today, I think Victoria and Sam are happy to answer them. Seeing none, I know it's a lot to digest, and I urge the members of the community who are watching today or may watch later to go to seapinesliving.com, where these materials will be available. And if you have comments or concerns, you should feel free to send them to comments@csacpines.com or directly to me at chairman@csacpines.com. And I assure you, all of the comments will be considered by the board. All the positions taken will be considered by the board as we move forward. Mr. Johnson, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, Larry, I'd like to make a comment as I've in my second year of chairing the Safety Security Committee, and every meeting's almost like Groundhog Day, because all problems, all conversations goes back to economics, and there simply is not and has not been the funding to. We are so woefully underfunded that I'm amazed that Toby is able to perform at the level that he is with his team. And you know, I want everyone to know we're not Chicken Little crying the sky is falling. I really believe our safety and security is woefully in dire state right now. We've got to address it immediately. We cannot kick this can down the road. It has to be done this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments, Mr. Caskey?
I echo Bill completely. I chaired the safety and security before him, and the concern, it is Groundhog Day. I do want to challenge you, Sam, that when you're putting the needs together, which is clear, you got a $2 million bogey here. The second thing though is I would encourage you and challenge you to push the technology question in addition to the people question of how we can use technology, gate technology or whatever. And that's going to be longer term than what Bill and I are just saying about the immediacy of this problem. But I do think as you're developing the business case, we need to have adequate resources, because I think the lack of funding prevents us from the level of technology investments that can be made that solve this even more longer term. So I think we have the immediate $2 million bogey, but I would encourage you within your materials to develop resources around technology.
Understood, Jim. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, Mr. Spear?
Unmute here. I thought the presentation was very good. My comment would be so that we're not continually chasing our tail, and I've been on the board for about 7 or 8 years now. I would suggest that the staff also look at projecting what kind of growth they're seeing, at least at a minimal level, so that we're not constantly chasing the staffing level that keeps our staffing need that keeps increasing. So whether that's a 3% increase annually or 5 or whatever they determine it is, but I don't want to. I would like to see us not constantly chasing this triage problem.
Thank you, Rich. Anything else? Anyone else? Great. And again, I appreciate everyone's patience in looking at this, and I encourage those who watch the video or in the future to go to cpinesliving.com.
And Larry, just as a reminder, this is the first time the board has seen this. This is the first time the community has seen this. We'll be sending it out to the board members after this meeting, and we'll also be posting, as you said, to the community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. We'll move on then to new business. Ms. Shanahan, you have a correction you want to make in one of the
Yes, standard for 9C. The resolution, as it was pointed out by a property owner, thank you, that the numbers were transposed when in the motion itself. So we wanted it to read, resolved, Sea Pines Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors, on recommendation of the Finance Committee, approves the transfer of funds from the undesignated fund balance to the capital reserve funds and the emergency reserve funds in the amount of $1 million and $354,000 respectively as presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have appointed a nominating committee for the Board of Directors election of 2022. I've asked Mr. Johnson to serve as the chair and Mr. Spear and Mr. Thompson to serve as the members of the committee, and I serve as ex officio. This is the first step in the nomination of directors for election in 2022 to start serving a 3-year term in 2023. We'll be getting information out from the nominating committee as to those who are interested in applying for a service on the board will be able to do so and be considered by the nominating committee. I read all too often on social media that we're not a diverse group of people, or we are people who don't know what we're doing, or other nice things about the way we work. I encourage those who feel that they can do a good job on this board. I won't say even better, just a good job on this board, and who think that they can do a good job that may be better than those who are doing it today, to put their names up for nomination. It is a commitment of time and effort, but it is a very rewarding one. And the best way to have your strong views considered is to sit on this board. So the nominating committee will be looking forward to getting applications for nomination. Can I get approval for the nominating committee appointments? All in favor, please raise your hand. Bill, please raise your hand. I have also appointed Mr. Caskey and Mr. Sigmund as co-chairs of the nominating committee for Class B. I also sit ex officio on that committee. Can I get approval for that committee? Thank you very much. I have committee charters for several of the committees are in your packet. We have the executive committee charter and the Finance Committee Charter and the Gate Entry Committee Charter and the Land Use Management Committee Charter and the Safety and Security Transportation Committee Charter. All of these have been approved by the committees themselves. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. Any questions on any of these charters? Seeing none, I'll seek approval of the committee charters as presented in the packets. All in favor, raise your hands, please. That's approved. And lastly, we have an encroachment agreement for West Royal Turn, Lot 10. We've approved it by email, but I'm asking for approval, ratification through the board. All in favor, say aye, or raise your hands. And that is done.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Ellis.
I did not vote to approve that. That's the one with the fence.
Yes, so that is the fence, and the legal address is West Turn, Lot 10. The mailing address is 2 Baynard that we discussed. That's the fence that is on the property owner's property, but we're allowing them to put the fence on top of an existing CSA encroachment across the property. So
this is not the fence that involves actual open space, David. This is the one where it's their property.
The resolution says open space.
Yeah, well, then we will correct that. That is not open space. That's the encroachment for that property, for the two Baynard.
And I want to be registered as voting against it until and unless CSA comes up with a policy on fences, or whether they are for against it when it involves CSA property. I think we're acting in an arbitrary and ad hoc manner, and we need to decide whether we are going to have a position on fences if we get another request, wherever it's located, if it involves CSA or not. I do know that it's got to be approved by ARB. They are the final authority. But I don't like taking this and then we're faced with a precedent when someone else wants a fence that we've already granted one, and then we turn it down, we could be considered arbitrary. I just think we need the policy. And so for that reason, I vote against it.
David, I appreciate that. You'll be registered that way. Anyone else? Any other comments? I didn't mean to move that fast if there was concern. Any other? David, you'll be so noted. Thank you. The resolution passes. That is the entirety of our agenda. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring before the board at this time? If not, I'll accept the motion to adjourn. Mr. Caskey, Mr. Borghese seconded. We are adjourned. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. It's now 12:10. We will go to 12:15. Questions, and we will come back at 12:15 and add. We do have a number of questions for the board, which I will try to answer with your help. So 5 minutes. We're immediately back at 12:15. There you
There you go.
go. Okay, you want to stop sharing? There we go. Okay, we are back. And as people are coming back, I'm going to start getting the questions because I'm sure folks are getting hungry. So the first question comes from Alan House. And Mr. House's question is, with as many people in Sea Pines that have dogs, can we get a dog park in Sea Pines? This would be a great amenity. Also, people who cannot do the mile walks as they age would appreciate it greatly. Sun City has a nice park to model after. The Hilton Head Park is inconvenient. Sam? I don't, let me say this. I don't think we have any current plans to create a dog park. I'm not sure that we have the appropriate level of property that we could dedicate to that, but I guess we can ask the MEMP.
I would suggest we put that with either MEMP or strategic planning as a goal for us, if that's, and let them review that.
Mr. Sigmund?
Larry?
Yes.
I have suggested for 3 years or more that we try the area next to the trolley stop at lot 1 and 2 at the edge of the forest preserve. Matthew helped out. It cleared out a lot of the area. We have parking there. It'd be an incentive to actually build restrooms there. It's very simple, very easy, small fence, not that expensive. So you have parking, we have the restrooms, we have a dog park. And now we can compete with all the other communities around the county or around the country. It's a very popular thing. I don't have a dog, but I really, really support the dog parks. You go to Moss Creek, it is phenomenal. It's just it's where we need to be. We have the land.
Okay, well, Don, I'm sure there are both, in terms of what you propose, there are some issues in terms of capital expenses and also insurance issues, but I think it's a good idea. It's a great idea to ask our committees to study it.
Well, and I would also, we're working with the Forest Preserve Committee now, as well as the resort, to look at some uses within the Forest Preserve and ultimately come up with a workable master plan that we all can love and adore. And we can certainly put this as a consideration through that.
Okay.
As far as finances and insurance, in 2015, I proposed a hose bib at what I call Sunset Park down past the South Beach Marina. We had many residents here asking for a hose bib just to wash off their dogs as they come off the beach down there at Bluff Villas, etc. At that time, the cost was $3,000. They finally escalated the cost over $50,000, so it would not fit in the budget. All we were looking for was a few pavers, a hose bib, and a place to wash the dog off. No one would do it. That's 2015. We're still kicking the can down the road. That's all we do. We always say it's budget, etc.
I will pledge to you that we won't kick it down the road. We will study it and we'll come up with why we should or shouldn't do it. So I'm going to ask strategic planning as a starting point.
Yes, and I would also include, I would ask, we'll also discuss it with the Resort and the Forest Preserve Committee, because those are, that is the most logical spot if we're going to pursue that, would be property adjacent to the trolley light in the Forest Preserve.
Okay.
I would think the resort would move forward with it because it's an amenity that the resort could offer to their guests.
I will take the answer is we will send it to these committees and ask them to study it in the next several meetings they have. And Mr. House and Don Sigmund, thank you for that suggestion. We will not kick it down the road. Okay, next is a suggestion from Suzanne Smith of a boat storage area. I'd like to propose a boat storage area for Sea Pines owners. Not only will this generate income, but would be greatly enhance the Sea Pines living. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, our biggest challenge with that is where to locate it based on the property limitations associated in Sea Pines.
Does CSA own property adjacent to a waterway that would allow?
Well, I think what Ms. Smith's suggestion would be for trailer and boat parking for storage and that nature, not necessarily not dockage. So our challenge becomes, where would we create such a facility like that?
Okay, well, this again seems to me to be good things to send to Mr. Pardue's strategic planning, because it does come under the heading of what do we want Sea Pines to have in terms of property owner amenities, which is one of the areas that might be funded by a transfer fee. as we develop funds necessary to sell the gate and other things that property owners may like. So David Pardue, your committee is going to be actively involved in the next couple of months of looking at both of those things. Thank you. And thank you to Ms. Smith. Next is a comment from Ms. Jennifer Lineweber, who says, thank you. I don't have a question, but would like to extend our family's thanks to all involved with the infrastructure improvements of North Sea Pines Drive. Communication has been excellent regarding the schedule delays and traffic rerouting. The work to date looks to be a huge improvement, and we are looking forward to enjoying both the new road and leisure trails. Please extend our sincere appreciation to both the project management and all workers involved with the day-to-day improvements. And I'll add a communications folks. So Ms. Lineweber, thank you very much for those kind thoughts. Next set of questions comes from Alex Cruden, Mr. Alex Cruden. What is going on regarding the alleged attempt to poison a security supervisor? I believe you're referring to what the Island Packet referred to as our 2 security officers who were involved in a prank. And as Toby mentioned, they have been terminated for employment. And given that this is an employment matter, human resources matter, we don't comment publicly on other human resources issues. Sam?
I would also add, Larry, that this is the packet report and charges have been pursued, but this is outside the scope of CSA. Our focus was on the employment matter. The charges are outside of our, this is a Beaufort County Sheriff's Department matter at this point. And I would suggest that's where you seek that information.
Right. And CSA is not pursuing charges. They're being pursued by the sheriff.
They're being pursued through the sheriff by the individual who was affected by the 2 individuals that were terminated.
Mr. Cruz's next question is, what is the status of the lawsuit regarding the trolley accident? It is still pending, and we don't otherwise discuss legal matters. I think that's correct.
That's
still
correct.
Pending after a long period of time. Next question, has there been any attempt to negotiate with Jill Jinks? I assume you mean negotiating with regard to her lawsuit, which involves the critical infrastructure referendum. The answer is that matter is still in discovery, and as long as we are in the discovery process, mediation or other negotiations are not appropriate, but certainly that is something that will come up following the end of discovery.
We've already addressed number 4.
Number 4, explaining, okay, we've taken care of that. So that covers Mr. Cruden's questions. Thank you, Alex, for those questions. Next question is from Stephen Halpin, Lot 10 Royal Turn, I believe, which refers to the encroachment agreement we just asked. Is West Royal Turn the same as Royal Turn Road? I think the answer is no.
No,
it is not.
They're different. And there's legal address that we live under for the Sea Pines master plan, and that the property was divided up under, but then there's the street address, and that's where the confusion comes in sometimes. So really what we're talking about is 2 Boehner Code. And this is, and to answer the second part of the question, this has no effect on the beach encroachment at all, on the beach at all.
Thank you. And thank you for that question, Mr. Halpin. The next question comes from Lori Bailey regarding the security. It seems from the information you provided, the security issues coming from short-term rentals are mostly noise, parking, towels, bicycles, and properly parked, et cetera. Why can't we hire a few low-level security people to address these issues instead of hiring a higher-level police officer? It appears that most people are compliant once informed. These additional people can be funded by the increased gate revenues from all the extra revenue from increased number of rental gate passes. Well, let me take it backwards. The increased level of rental passes at the current rate is barely funding our current operations budget. As Sam and Victoria noted, when we put the budget forward, they stretched every dollar to be able to maintain the level of staffing that we have and the anticipated capital improvements. And that was with a relatively small increase in salaries, which probably still doesn't bring us to competitive rates. And so the rental gate at the current rental rates are just covering our anticipated staffing without being competitive. In terms of hiring higher level police officers versus lower level security people, in fact, I think the mix that Sam has proposed does in fact include a mix. Land use management issues can be handled by a land use manager, assuming there is compliance. But to the extent that there is non-compliance or occasionally a very angry renter who isn't involved. We need security. In addition, we need more security, what I'll call walking around community patrol officers who are literally stationed where the largest number of guests and visitors are located, Harbortown, South Beach, which I think if you look at the typical town approach to enforcement, if you will, not the Barney Fife approach, but the Andy approach, you are present. You have a presence on a regular basis. And the very presence maintains a level of order, and that we don't have enough people to do and cover. So we would need higher levels of police officers. But I can assure you that all those issues are being considered as we look at the staffing needs. And last, from David D'Amico regarding low-speed electrical vehicles, I continue to see more and more low-speed electric vehicles on the roads. Many of them are by a company called GEM or by Moog. I see them on the roads in Sea Pines. I know Marriott and the Sea Pines Company are regularly running their vehicles on the roads. Has something changed in allowing these vehicles to travel on our roads? We continue to have a policy that prohibits low-speed vehicles by GEM or Moog on our roads. They are not permitted into the community if they are identified at the gates. We do have one homeowner who was denied the right to use his Moog, but he has engaged us in litigation, questioning the validity of our policy. And so you may see him on the road, but if he doesn't have a decal, but I guess he's just decided to run his Moog anyway, but given the pendency of the litigation, we are somewhat limited in our rights to him. But any other party that attempts to bring a Moog into Sea Pines will be stopped at the gate. If they get by the gate and a security officer identifies them, they will be asked to leave.
And just as a reminder, Mr. Chairman, under the gate agreement, are the resorts and our commercial entities are allowed to use their low-speed vehicles as service providers.
The service
getting to and from, and you see those on a regular basis. It's been that way for years. And additionally, we use low-speed gasoline vehicles for our maintenance folks moving up and down and around the community. Right? It's just strictly for service and those kind of things at this point.
But not for property owner recreational use. Amanda, unless we've gotten any other questions, I think that's the last of them. Amanda?
Yes, sir. That completes the questions we received up until adjournment.
Thank you to those who asked those questions. Again, I appreciate all the time and effort that's been put in by the board today and for the service you put in through your committees. And we are currently therefore adjourned, and we'll see you again on May 19th.
Thank you all very much.